Okay, good evening, everybody. Thanks for participating with tonight's presentation on the Flying Yankee. Bob Kotsonis is going to be doing the presentation tonight, and I'll turn the mic over to him. It's going to be a pretty exciting night.
Good evening. Again, I'm Bob Kotsonis. I'm the treasurer for the Flying Yankee Association. This is the new group that's now taking control of the Flying Yankee to get the restoration done. So, do we have any Flying Yankee aficionados online or in the room that know all about it? Okay, so you'll get a pretty good rounded look at what the train is, why it's so important, and then kind of what's going on with it. There's been a lot happen the last couple of years. But so anyway, the agenda, I'm going to go over the history of the train, a little bit how it was used in New England. We're going to talk about I would call it a restoration journey because it really is a journey. The restoration has been started and stopped at least 3 or 4 times. So I'll tell you kind of how that is going. And then I'll give you an idea right now what the current state of the train is. You know, what shape it's in, what was restored, what wasn't restored, what work needs to be done. And then we'll have a discussion about the transfer of ownership because we're actually getting ownership of the train hopefully in July from the state of New Hampshire. The state of New Hampshire currently owns the train. And then a little bit about what are we going to do with it? How are we going to, and not up in the same problem that the previous groups did. So we'll hopefully be able to answer that for you and tell you really what's going on. So the Flying Yankee, it was built in 1934 by the Budd Company. It was delivered to the Boston and Maine in 1935 as Boston and Maine number 6000. 197 feet long, had 3 articulated cars, which means that this 3-car train is the Flying Yankee. It's articulated, meaning that the center trucks are shared between the 2 adjacent cars. So you basically are missing 2 trucks. They did this for speed and for weight, because this train is very, very light compared to its size. But it had 132 passengers capacity, which is actually big for a 3-car Zephyr. We'll talk about the other Zephyrs. And it ran from 35 until 57 when they retired it and went off to Edaville in 57. But the train is, it's a 3-car train. The front part is a combination where the driver is, the power unit's there. There's a baggage area and a small seating area. The middle car is basically a coach. And then the rear car is a combination coach and lounge car. So you'll see the interior pictures. These are drawings of the train itself. So this is the control cab up here. And when I sit in this, I pity the poor guys who had to try to drive this train with this 8-cylinder diesel like 2 feet from them. And I'm sure they had no hearing protection or anything. But anyway, here's this is the driver's section. This is the Winton 201A diesel. This is a baggage compartment, and this big box here is a steam heater. That was a source of heat for the train. And then there was a small buffet kind of a galley area where they serve light refreshments. And then the rest of that power car is 28 seats. This is the middle car. You can see it's basically all seats. And then the rear parlor car had a combination of regular coach seating, and it had 12 lounge cars, kind of like first class, more expensive place to ride. And it's interesting, you see there's actually 13 chairs here, and the one that's got no number on it is actually for the brakeman. Because because it was articulated, you had to turn it on Ys. Well, they didn't have Ys all over the place. So a lot of times this thing had to back up to the closest Y. So the brakeman actually would sit in the back of the train. He actually could control the brakes. There was a brake lever there, and the engineer controlled the power. So they did back this thing up. So it's part of the Zephyr family. There were 10 Zephyrs actually. Excuse me? Oh, that's good. There were 10 Zephyr trains actually made between 34 and 39. They were all powered by Winton diesel engines. Winton eventually became part of EMD. They were purchased in 1930, but they still had their name out there at the time this was built. And the Yankee was the only Zephyr train to make it out of the Midwest. See, the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy had all the other ones. So this was the only one that wasn't part of that line. The whole stainless steel construction, the shovel nose, the design was really, when you read the marketing material put out by Bud at this time, it was to try to regain some of that lost passenger volume that they were already seeing even in the 30s. And that offered speed and comfort. It was fully air conditioned, and it actually had lower operating costs because right now in the 30s, passenger trains were run by steam engines, which were expensive to run. So this had a very low operating cost. So it made it attractive, especially to the B&M, old cheap B&M. And it really was a pioneer use of diesel engines for passenger service. These were the first. And the Winton was really the first successful diesel engine. And if you look at how this design of Zephyr's matured, it actually it's the precursor to the E unit, the modern passenger E unit. They became more like an E unit than they did later on. But I hope you can read this. This is all 10 of them. And you can see that there were 4 of them that were just 3-car trains. B&M being the second one made. They all had the same engine. The last two twin Zephyrs had a little bit more horsepower, 660 versus 600. When you get to the other ones later on, you can see what happens. The twin Zephyrs in the number 9904 is 7 cars. And they start to lose the articulation, meaning that the power car has couplers and can detach from the train. The rest of the train is articulated. So they were already trying to struggle with this. How do I turn this damn thing? And then when you get to the very last Zephyr, the general Pershing Zephyr, it's completely couplers on every car. So you can take the thing apart. You can see the engine configurations got really kind of wild. They started putting 2 V12 Wintons in them and actually took up 2 cars, had engines in them. And then you can see this 3,000 horsepower had 2 Wintons and also V12s and 1 V16. It's like, huh? So anyway, but the last Winton, notice what happened on the engine. They actually put a 567 in it. It was the first one to have a commercial, what we consider a modern, diesel locomotive. In terms of the 3-car Zephyrs, by far the Yankee had the most passenger capacity. The other ones kind of gave away seats for, diners and dinettes and things like that. The Flying Yankee was like, get as many passengers in there as you can. In terms of who's surviving, there's only 4 of them left. So the Pioneer Zephyr's in the Chicago Museum of Industry. It's very well preserved. It's never going to run because it's 2 stories underground. So it's a great display, and if you ever get a chance to see it, I have not seen it myself. It's on my bucket list. The Mark Twain Zephyr is a 4-car train. The Wisconsin Great Northern Railroad bought it, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. Unfortunately for them, they got a shell. There was literally nothing in it. No engine, no seats, no anything. It was just stainless steel shell. I've been out there, and we're actually working with them. They have put it back together. They built an interior. They've got they're doing an engine transplant this summer to repower the thing, and they're going to use it as a dinner train. The General Pershing Zephyr, just the power car, exists at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis. And then, of course, us, the Flying Yankee. And if we can get it operating, it will be the only one that's almost in near original condition that's running. So it'll be a feat if we can get it done. So operations of the train, it kind of ran all over the place. So the initial run, when it first was inaugurated, ran from Boston all the way up through Bangor. As the war effort picked up in the 40s, the 132 capacity just wasn't enough. So they pulled it off that line. And interesting, they started moving it to different parts of New England, and every time they moved it, they changed the name. So that's why you see the Cheshire, the Businessman, the Mountain Man, all this other stuff. So every time they did it, that's what they did. So it ran from Boston to Littleton as the Mountaineer. And then it ran from Boston to White River Junction as the Cheshire, and then from Troy to Boston as the Minuteman. And for a little bit of time, about 6 months, it ran as the Businessman from Portland and Boston. And if you look at its history, it spent most of its time as the Flying Yankee running between Boston and Bangor, and running on from Boston to White River Junction as the Cheshire. That's where it spent most of its career. It did only about a year running through the Notch. And then next is in Troy. The Businessman was really in the middle of its time as the Minuteman. So it's a variety of times it's spent. When it went to Boston, it routinely went back and forth between the western route going up through Dover to Portland, or the eastern route going through to Portsmouth and up the coast up that way and connected in Berwick. So the early restoration of the train. So remember the trains in Edaville. And in 1990, Robert Morrill, who was the owner of Storyland up in New Hampshire, that attraction, purchased the train from Edaville. And it took him about 3 years to kind of get it all set. And then he moved it to Glen, New Hampshire, awaiting to restore it. They had plans to actually take the engine, the A car, what we call the A car, the power car, and ship the whole damn thing off and have it totally rebuilt. They were planning on doing that. And this was all about a plan called the Mountain Division, which is something that is something that Robert Morrill developed as a plan. He was going to do this big New Hampshire development. So if you look at this map, this was his vision. He was going to restore the Flying Yankee. He was going to run it from down near North Conway all the way up to the Notch, and stop it at Fabian's and turn it around and bring it back down. He was also going to have a regular second passenger train with F units and regular coaches as the other one, and they would just go back and forth. So this was his pitch to the state of New Hampshire when the state of New Hampshire was looking for bidders to operate the Mountain Division that had been out of service. So he put his bid in, and this guy, he had some interesting ideas. This is actually him sitting in the cab of the Yankee. His idea was, I guess it's either go big or go small. This is the Attitash ski area. This was an enormous development, putting in a Y, all these tracks, a combination of retail, hotel. It was going to make a big attraction out of it. And this was going to be the base camp and the lodge, and also the station for the train. So great looking station. What should happen? So he was going to use the Y at Attitash to turn it. At the other end, he didn't have enough land at Fabian's to do a Y. So he said, well, we're just going to make a 200-foot turntable. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never seen a turntable that big before, but I mean, it's a great concept. He put his bid in, along with Conway Scenic put their bid in. We all know what happened. Conway Scenic got the bid, he didn't. And he said, well, you know what? I'm going to give it to the state of New Hampshire. So he sold it to them for $1. And he said, you know, it's yours now. You can restore it and run it and do whatever you want with it. At the same time, our group, Flying Yankee Restoration Group, was formed in '96. We were the fundraising arm, and we were also supposed to work on the restoration. So the first big restoration, it went from Glen to Claremont and Concord in Claremont, New Hampshire for restoration. It was there from '97 to 2005. Most of the restoration that has been done to the train was done there. They did fabulous work. When they got it, nobody realized how bad the condition was of the train. It had been sitting out in the elements for all those years. Nothing capped over, water coming into the engine. I mean, it was It was a real mess. Um, it in 2005, it went, the relationship between the state, the Flying Yankee group, and Claremont and Concord kind of fell apart. So to resurrect it, they said, look, we're going to take it to Lincoln, move it out of there, and the Plymouth and Lincoln, they're going to go ahead and do the restoration. Well, that kind of never really happened. So in Lincoln, the trucks were restored. There was some roof sealing done in 2010, but really since 2010, it's been just sitting there. So that's a big concern. So what's been done to the train? A lot of work has been done. And again, most of it at Claremont and Concord. They had to rebuild the nose. I don't know if the history of the train is it had a really bad accident in 45. It crushed the front of the train. The Boston and Maine kind of slapped it together to get it back on the rails, never really fixed the alignment. And actually the people at Claremont and Concord fixed the alignment from the 1945 crash. They said it was 2 inches off between the front and the back. So they had to rebuild the nose. All the doors, in fact, it was interesting. We had a guy who worked on it when he was working for the B&M, and he went and opened the doors. He said, you know, even when it was running, these doors never worked this well because they took them apart. All the structural steel behind it was just shot. So they replaced all of that. So they did a tremendous amount of body work to the train that nobody was planning on doing. So all the seats in the train were taken out. They were all rebuilt, all cushioned and all that stuff. They're sitting in a container, all wrapped up in New Hampshire, ready to go back in the train. The main generator and the auxiliary generator were totally rebuilt and placed back on the train. Traction motors were rebuilt. We have those. Trucks were rebuilt. We have those. Those are up in New Hampshire. And then new fuel tanks were fabricated. Basically, they took the old ones and reverse engineered it. Same thing with the air tanks. They're brand new set, just waiting to go in. And Westinghouse actually did a custom design brake system to replace the old one. So that's sitting in boxes waiting to be put on the train. As to the Winton, the original block was repaired and refinished. They said it was good enough shape to use. Crankshaft has been reconditioned. It's back installed into the block of the engine. Claremont and Concord reverse engineered new pistons and sleeves. I would love to be a witness to that because I'm sure it was difficult to have that done. But they got 10 sets. They wanted to do more, but the Flying Yankee Restoration Group said, no, we can't afford it. So we do at least have 2 extra ones. So 8 sleeves have been installed into the block. New injectors were made. We have 10 of those. All the glass in the train was replaced. And all the parts that are not on the train right now are sitting in 5 containers up in New Hampshire on a DOT lot, waiting to be moved away. These are some pictures of kind of what it looked like before and after it left the Claremont and Concord. The picture to the left is the engine when they got it. You can see, I mean, it looks like a boat anchor that came out of the Portland Harbor. And this is what it looked like when the Claremont and Concord, when it left there. You can see the work they did on it. You wouldn't even recognize it. This is the B car. This on the left is the condition it came in. You can see the stains on the ceiling from water damage. The seats are all moldy. And this is the work that they did. So the B car, the center car has been restored. So it looks great. This is the engineer's compartment. You can see the kind of condition that was before they started working on it. And on the right-hand side, you can see what they did to it. They had to basically rebuild all of this. And this is the underside of the nose. You can see the steel supports behind the stainless steel, the carbon steel. You can see how rusted it was. Any of that steel that was in the car looked just that way. So around the doors, around windows, stuff. And again, they weren't planning on having to do all that work. But you can see the nose of the thing. They just literally took it apart and rebuilt it. This is the engine bay. How they look after they pulled the engine out. You can see what it is now, nice and clean, ready to go. So all that work was done in Claremont. it comes to up to Lincoln, we do a little bit of work and things kind of start to go downhill. So from 2010 to 21 is not great stuff. Like anything, funding starts to dry up. There's a lot of turnover on the board. The state really isn't all that interested. There's no plan to move forward. It was really stagnating. 2016, there was a new board that was formed. They tried to get something going. By now, the state had no, we're gonna do something with it. Hobo at that point also says, look, this thing's been sitting here for like 15 years, so I need the space. So they wanted it off the property. So the state said, okay, all right, we're gonna put it as a static display out in front in Lincoln. There's across from Hobo, there's a White Mountain Attractions building. It's like you can go there and get pamphlets and hear about the area. They were gonna put a track out front and just put the thing there, put it on its trucks and just put it on display. Great idea, but at the last minute, it all fell apart. So it didn't go anywhere. Then at this point, by 2020, there's no direction. The state's not interested. The board is down to 3 members. You know, it was on the verge of collapse. So a bunch of people got together. We also wondered, why did we do this? This is a lot of work. But anyway, a new board came in 2021. And the first thing that we did was we spent about a year going through every piece of information and record that we could find to find out what the hell happened, you know, because we don't want to make the same mistakes. So what went wrong? And then another year and a half to convince the state of New Hampshire, gee, you've had this thing since 97. It's still sitting there. Do you think we might want to think differently about doing something here? That we need a different direction. So the basic problem that the train had trying to restore it all those years in the 90s, the state owned it. So the state treated it like a bridge. So if I'm going to repair a bridge, I get a contractor and he puts a bid in, it's got his profit in it, and I just, here, you do all the work. So it's the most expensive way to do anything because you're paying for a contractor to do the work. They would not use volunteers because of liability. They were just freaked out about that. The other thing we found out is that when we tried to go out to donors, they said, well, why would I give you money for something the state owns? I'm not going to do that. And then we talked to grant people, and the grant people said, when you get ownership, come see me. But if the state owns it, there's nothing we can do for you. So it was all kinds of reasons for the state not to own it. Our conclusion was that ownership transfer needs to happen if this is ever going to go anywhere. In fact, we were at the point where if we couldn't get the state to agree to that, we were probably done because we'd just be ended up in the same place that everybody else did. So by the spring of 2022, thank God, after I don't know how many meetings with the state, I know the state of Maine moves very quickly, but the state of New Hampshire moves really slowly. They finally agreed, yeah, we probably should look at something different. So they realized that the ownership transfer needed to take place, but their problem was, how do you do that? Because it's a state asset. I can't just give it to you. You're basically a private company. I can't take a state asset and do that. Normally, if it was like a truck or something, I'd have to go to the state asset disposal place and put it on the website, and it would be bids, and you know, that's the Wild West. You don't know where it would end up. But then they said, well, maybe we could talk to the Attorney General and the governor, and they could like, well, special circumstances, we can go ahead and just give it to this not-for-profit organization. And that kind of got messy, and they said, that's probably not going to work. And then they came up with a great idea, which I don't know where they pulled it out from, but it was quite a rabbit. They had a process in the state that the DOT, Department of Transportation, ran. It was when they have an old bridge, they had a process for disposing of historic bridges. And it was very well written, you know, who does what, how the decision's made, how long it takes, who has to weigh in, all this stuff. It was very well done. They said, why? We're going to use that process because that already exists. But it does mean that it's going to have to go out to the public. Anybody who's interested could potentially own the train. So the state did two things in the summer of 2023. First of all, they spent some money. First time they'd spent money on this thing in probably 18 years. They had a consultant come in and go through and got it qualified for the National Registry of Historic Places. So it's ready to go on the registry. I had no idea how difficult it was to do something like this. The report they submitted is like 35 pages long. It's got all this stuff in it. But no other Zephyr is on that list. So, but what comes with that, it protects the train. You can't turn it into a hot dog stand. Now you're going to restore it. You have to be careful how you do it. You can't just do anything you want. There's some controls. You have to try to make it as original as possible. Then they developed this request for a proposal, which was going to the public and saying, okay, we have a train. If you would like, we're accepting proposals for ownership of that train, and complete your proposal, send it to us, and we'll consider you. So anybody could, 470 Club could have gone out there and done that. Here's what was in the RFP. First of all, you had to address how you're going to maintain the historic standards that are wrapped up in being on the National Historic Registry. You had to, they wanted to know where was it going to be, how are you going to move it? They wanted to know how are you going to maintain it, how are you going to preserve it, and then how are you going to maintain it so that the public has access to it, because this is a public issue. And then they have this agreement that you had to submit to that says for the next 15 years, the state has oversight on the restoration process. So that was in the RFP. So you had a bunch of other stuff you had to give them. So the RFP was put out in November of 23, and the state said, okay, put it on their website. They notified everybody. I know that Conway Scenic was approached. Patriot Rail, who now owns Hobo, was approached. If you let you know that this is out there. So we did our due diligence. This is our application. Ours is about 30 pages long. So we submitted our proposal we submitted our proposal on November 3rd. And the state informed us on the 21st of March that we had been selected as the new owners. So it doesn't mean you have it, but you've been selected. So they actually allowed us to go public on April 5th, that we could tell people that we were going to be the new owners. And where we are right now, there's a bunch of paperwork we're going through and agreements we're signing and we're negotiating back and forth. We're working primarily with the New Hampshire Department of Transportation and the New Hampshire Division of Historic Resources to kind of get this done. And they've been very supportive, and they really want to make this happen. So it's pleasing. And the state's going to draw up a purchase and sale agreement, and we'll basically get the train for $1. The last step to kind of like the final stamp, and we get the keys to the, I don't know if the thing has keys or not, but we get the keys to the thing in July, because it has to go to the Governor's Council for final approval. And the state departments are telling us it's kind of a rubber stamp. It's a procedure. Don't worry about it. You got the train. So, all right. So what do now be careful what you wish for. Now we got this thing. What are we going to do with it? First of all, we decided we weren't going to do this alone, because that was the other thing the old group did. They tried to do everything by themselves, and that's not a good idea. So we have something we call project partners. These are organizations that are going to be actively involved in the restoration of the train. The biggest one is Conway Scenic. They have really stepped up to the plate big time. We actually have agreements with them on how, on operating the train and helping us restore it. And we're putting up a building together. You'll hear about that. Wisconsin Great Northern is helping us because they're going through the repower of their train right now. We may end up there too, having to repower the Winton, because we don't know if we have all the parts. So they're going to be very helpful. They've actually helped us already. Effective Grants is an organization that finds you grant money. Hunter Research is a company that specializes in when you got something on the National Historic Registry, they help you, do registry speak, the forms and reports and stuff. They help you with all that stuff. And then New Hampshire Preservation Alliance is a nonprofit that helps nonprofits in the state of New Hampshire with grants and some other things they do. So they're going to be actively involved working with us. Other ones we call project resources are organizations that have agreed they're not going to be actively involved, but they have information that's useful to us and they're going to provide it. And all of these that are listed here have already done so, even before we own the train. So we're getting a lot of cooperation across the United States to make this happen. So the plan is right now it's in Hobo. It's not on its trucks, it's sitting up on blocks. It's going to be moved this fall. That I will tell you that as of this week, that time frame is really in flux, and not to the later side, it's to the earlier side. So it's conceivable this thing could be moving in July, but we're dealing with that right now. But the goal, that first move, it's going to go to North Conway. As part of that move, it's going back on its trucks and going to be put on rail. We're looking at a couple locations in North Conway to put it on the tracks, and we're working with Dave's work at Conway Scenic to kind of come to the final decision, where's that going to be? We're going to be constructing a building in Conway that hopefully will start in the spring of 2025 after we get approvals and stuff. The building is going to be jointly owned by our group and Conway Scenic. We're going to share expenses and staff and equipment in that building. So it's a good way for both of us to get something that we don't have right now. Once that building is up, we think October 2025, we'll move the train from North Conway down to Conway into the new building. And that's really where the restoration will restart. Because we're going to have to go through, do a major assessment of the train, the parts that we have, the parts that we don't have, that we thought we had, to find out, what's going on. So what do we have? Can we, what's in what kind of condition? Can we really use the Winton, or is it going to cost us another $500,000 to get fixed? That kind of thing. And then once we have a better handle on what we're faced with, then we'll do some realistic planning on exactly how are you going to approach the restoration? What are you going to do first? What are you going to do second? How are you going to fund it? And that kind of stuff. As I said, the Conway Scenic is going to play a key role in this. The agreement we have is about helping us with restoration, operating the train once it's restored, and then maintaining the train for us once it's restored. It was patterned after the relationship you guys already have with Conway Scenic. So it's almost identical. If we end up using the Winton, it'll only run 4 or 5 times a year, because that's a fragile engine. It's like 80+ years old. If it is running in the train, it'll be the only operating Winton that I'm aware of anywhere in the United States. And that's an important engine all by itself. So if we can get it running, great. It may end up that we have to repower the thing. If we have to repower it, we're not getting rid of the Winton. We'll put it on a block for display, maybe even get it running, on a block, so that we'll do something with it. But again, if it's the Winton's in it, it's only running 4 or 5 times a year, special event kind of thing. And then when it's not running, it'll be in display in the building. We're also on some of the busy weekends during the North Conway's rail season, we'll move it down to the North Conway yard for display. And at the site in Conway, we'll actually put up a small museum to go along to sort of supplement what we plan to do with the restoration. We'll use volunteers. In fact, we're working right now on our volunteer program, how it's going to work. Putting stuff, I've been on the phone this morning with an insurance broker about, buying insurance so that we have things covered for our volunteers. But it's key to keeping the cost down. And then we've raised, right now we have $471,000 in pledges. We've actually called in some of that money already, and we're seeking additional pledges right now. We're calling them pledges because, again, we don't own it yet. So if the boat goes on the rocks and this doesn't happen, we can at least give the money back. So we're taking pledges. And then once we do have ownership of the train, then it's going to be full push for, raising money. So that we think we've got most of the money to put the building up and move the train. When it gets to the restoration part, we're going to have to fundraise for that. We may have to fundraise for some of the building too. We're working on the cost of the building right now. And I think that's it. So questions?
Yes, this is Colin Devaney, sir. I've happened to done a senior seminar in high school with the Flying Yankee Restoration Committee, and I raised $359 and donated them to them for their work as much as possible. But you have a very good presentation, sir.
Thank you. Yes, and if you want to pledge, go to the website, flyingyankee.org. All right, thanks.
So back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, Mass Bay RE ran usually every February, an Amtrak charter up to Brattleboro and Bellows Falls. And one of our side trips was take a bus full of people up to the Claremont and Concord shop to see the progress on the Flying Yankee up there. And our last trip was in 2003 or 2004. I can't find any pictures of it, although I know I took some. May have been pre-digital, but at that time it seemed like the train was pretty far along. I mean, you've illustrated that with some of your photographs, and then everything just kind of died in a way, as you've noted, after it went up to Lincoln, and we had been doing some minor support, offering some, tickets to be auctioned off for our excursions and so on. But as time went on, without naming any names, it became clear that the people who were the principals of the association, or the restoration group at that time, were in way over their heads in terms of the ability to organize and raise money and all that stuff. And I'm sure you found that in the course of your investigation. So we're excited to see this next chapter, and it's probably a little premature, but Mass Bay RE does have a railroad preservation fund, and that's we'll be as you get to actually restoring the train, I think that we would let's just say you should be aware of that and make an application when you're at a point where the train is moved and you're ready to actually start working on the train.
Is there any speculation on where you might be running it, what the routes will be?
It'll be running on Conway Sandy's line. So it'll certainly go from Conway. Conway, it'll sort of be our base of operations in Conway. Obviously, there's no Y in Conway. There's no Y in North Conway. So the closest Y is to restore the Y in Bartlett, and also the Y that is up at Quebec Junction.
And my understanding is that talking to Paul Hallett years ago when he was the operations manager there, that they had actually kept the tail of the Y at Bartlett.
Yeah, it's still there.
Yeah, but they had kept it, and they had kept the tail track of the Y up at Quebec Junction, specifically with the idea that the Flying Yankee might be able to run up there, because it's actually one of the few railroads that has two places where a train could be turned on a Y in that part of New Hampshire.
Or we could always raise money and build that 200-foot turntable.
That's about an acre of land, I think, if my math is correct.
Isn't a 200-foot turntable too big or too long?
I wouldn't want to try to build one.
That's
I
major
think it
bridge
was for
construction.
sure.
Maybe the state of New Hampshire could do that for you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question or a comment or something. I rode on the Yankee when it was the Minuteman from Greenfield into Boston and back. And actually I rode in the rear car and sat on that little banquette that's in the back windows, and I had a suit. Actually, I used my trombone case for a suitcase and stuck it in the banquette. It was just wonderful. And I've when in some of the earlier releases from the about the Yankee, it said that they were going to have to replace the Winton engine, and your slide, the before and after on the Winton, uh, looked just wonderful. I mean, I hope you can get it running with the Winton, but it would be wonderful to hear it again. It had a wonderful sort of burble as a quality. It burbled along. It did, and I think it must have been loud for the engineer, but when you were out listening to it outside, it just had a wonderful sort of musical burble. So thank you very much. That's a great talk, and I wish you all the luck.
Great, thank you much.
Absolutely. One of the things I'm curious about is, clearly the most identifiable name for the train is the Flying Yankee, but it bore other names for most of its career, as your slide showed. And I wonder why you just don't refer to it. What was the number? 6,000, I think.
Yeah, we could. In fact, I don't know if you follow us on Facebook, but we actually found the original sign for the Mountaineer. We found that at an auction house in Pennsylvania. And I made a clandestine meeting in a parking lot in Nashua, and I got the sign.
Did the train name only appear on the nose of the power car?
Yep, that was it.
You could change it out.
I'm actually trying to convince Dave Swerk to give us the original Flying Yankee sign, which is sitting in his station in North Conway. So we'll see if we can get him to do that. But we actually haven't got that far as what are we going to put on the front. I imagine it's probably going to be the Flying Yankee, but we'll see. If we get to that point, it'll be a good problem to have.
So at this point, you don't have a timeline on getting it back into operation. I take it that's a little premature given the path.
It's really not until towards the end of 2025 that we're really going to know what we're up against. I mean, your observations about Claremont and Concord, it was ready to go back together. It really was. And it's
a lot of it was back together.
Yeah, it's a shame that it all stopped. And unfortunately, it was all about communication. Nobody was communicating well. And everybody had expectations that were just not realistic. So it's too bad. But hopefully, we don't want to make those same mistakes. A lot. Yeah, the question is what is it going to cost to restore it? And the answer to that is a lot. I think I have 16 documents, all titled cost to complete project from Claremont and Concord, and they're all a little bit different. But that's $2005. I think there's a difference between $2005 now and so who knows what I would be speculating, but it's going to be a lot.
Any other questions in the room here? Good.
Okay, super. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Great program.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll just end with, again, thanking Bob for the presentation. This is as exciting as we expected it to be, and we truly appreciate it. And I'll go on record to say anybody that can help with funds down the road, I'm sure there would be no argument. So thank you, guys. Everybody have a good night.
Thanks. Good night.